Thank you very much for attending my presentation today. Over the next 20 minutes, I hope to provide you with an insight into my research, which I began in October 2020 at the start of my part-time PhD in applied linguistics at Aston University. It's the aim of my research to explore the impact that the integration of pedagogical stylistics can have on the professional identity and well-being of English teachers working in secondary schools. In order to achieve this in the time we have, I've divided my presentation into three distinct areas. Firstly, I'll share my background and motivation behind my research. Secondly, I will look at the concepts and theories of professional identity amongst English secondary school teachers. And finally, I will look at aspects of pedagogical stylistics and how they could and must be woven into pedagogical approaches being used by English teachers. So firstly, my background and its influence on my decision to undertake this research. As I mentioned earlier, I'm completing this research project part-time to coincide with my current role as a second in department at a mixed academy in Nottinghamshire. Having spent close to 10 years working as an English teacher, I've been afforded a wide range of career opportunities. There was none more surprising than in 2015 when I was gifted the chance to teach an A-level language group. So being in the company I am at this conference, I was really conscious of my verb selection in that statement, but I really feel that gifted is the most apt choice, as it was arguably this opportunity which subsequently led me here today. In my previous experience as an English teacher with a master's degree, bachelor's degree and A-level in English literature, and with no qualification beyond a GCSE in English language, I would have been amongst the majority of English teachers working in secondary schools, the length and breadth of this country and beyond, who would, based on their qualifications, identify themselves as an English literature specialist. More on this problem later. In preparation for my new role, I spent the majority of the summer prior to seeing my new A-level class, learning about the linguistic theories and concepts relevant to the A-level English language syllabus. And as a result, I found the whole new world of analytical techniques was opened up to me. I found that the linguistic approaches to literature and linguistic approaches and frameworks which I learned and I'm continuing to learn enriched my analytical approaches to literary text in ways I hadn't previously considered. This became the first stepping stone on my route into stylistics. Whilst enjoying my newfound position as an A-level English language teacher, I began to formulate questions and considerations regarding the subject. I was curious as to why an English language A-level was fundamentally different to an English language GCSE, and why issues such as accent, dialect, pragmatics and semantics had virtually no presence, even in an introductory way, in an English language GCSE. I was also curious as to how many English teachers had the same experience that I did. If you consider, when you think about the number of literature specialists against language specialists currently working as English teachers in secondary schools, whether I was alone in my discovery of the key role linguistic techniques could take when in application to literary texts. How many English teachers before and since had been awakened to the possibilities of linguistics in their approaches to text as a result of inheriting English language A-level classes? As it happened, this opportunity could not have been more providential, occurring as it did at the same time as the government's shake-up of the exam system at GCSE, as well as the dramatic changes made at Key Stage 2, so primary education, in which a significant emphasis on grammar was placed. This led me, in my role as a Key Stage 3 coordinator at the time, who was very keen on transition and making the most of what has been called the wasted years of education at Key Stage 3, to the work of Ian Cushing, which some of you may know, which in turn led me to the work of Marcello Giovanelli, amongst others, and to where I currently am as part of the Aston Stylistics group. So, as a teacher, I've also had my share of experience working within what Giovanelli has succinctly called the Lang-Lit problem, referring to the delivery system of English education in the United Kingdom, where the curriculum is divided and assessed into strands, including English language, English literature, and more recently, English language and literature. During my career, I've experienced moments where I've been a class's English language teacher or their English literature teacher. There are occasions where I would be both an English language and an English literature teacher, but that would never be at the same time. In addition to this, I also worked for 2 years as a GCSE English Language Literature examiner before moving to become a GCSE English Language examiner for AQA's Paper 1, which is titled Explorations in Creative Reading and Writing, which you can see on the screen in front of you. In this paper, students are examined on their analytical response to an unseen piece of literature, where they're expected to comment on the language use, structure, and write an exploratory essay in response to another student's opinion about the extract. So I just want to clarify that a little more. I moved from examining one piece of literature to another piece of literature, but now I was an English language examiner and not an English literature examiner. You confused? Good. To put all this in another way, I've spent close to a decade in my teaching career as part of what David Crystal refers to as, on screen, a division which is intellectually indefensible, creatively limiting, and pedagogically absurd. He calls it an artificial separation, and even 23 years ago, he believed this had been going on for far too long. For more information on the causes and effects of this separation, I refer you to Marcello Giovanelli's first chapter in the recent publication you can see on this slide. In his chapter, Giovanelli succinctly uses the phrase to describe this as the Langlet problem. Giovanelli advocates working towards an English curriculum which would stress connections, continuity, and place language at the heart of the curriculum, in the hope of offering a way of developing students' abilities to be critical, engaged, and confident users of, and commentators on, a range of different discourse types. Where I hope my research will develop on this work is that I want to explore the effect that an integrated approach to English teaching would have on the very people responsible for delivering it, the English teachers. I believe that an integrated English achieved through the incorporation of pedagogical stylistics will affect the professional identity and well-being of the English secondary school teacher. This leads me into the second area of my presentation. In my reading, an interesting duality becomes apparent when looking at perceptions of English teaching and English teachers. On the one side, there is a view that English education is becoming marginalised and ignored by policymakers and educators alike. Alsop identifies that the humanities seems to be losing the culture war, a statement which unfortunately doesn't seem to be losing its relevance. This is ironic, given that Alsop also states that reading literature is perhaps now more important than ever in an age of dehumanising and fleeting images. In addition to this, if we shift our focus to inside the subject of English itself, we can observe battles within and without, where the historical privilege afforded to English literature marginalises English language, or where subjects such as English literature in turn find themselves marginalised against the growing influence of perceived objective STEM subjects such as science and maths, in a quest for what some consider the path towards truth and meaning. Academics and educators alike write a feeling that the ideas, values, and aesthetics which energise English education are ignored, and any attempts to instill positive change for the development of the subject are futile. This supposed grim future for the humanities is enough to dishearten and demoralise future generations of English teachers, but there is hope. On the other side of this dichotomy is the necessity of English in the curriculum and its vital role in the lives of students, the stability of society, and the progression of civilization as we know it. The influential English teacher Chris Curtis, in the afterword of his book, How to Be an English Teacher, calls on English teachers, new and old, to never underestimate their role, their duty, and their power in the English classroom. We see descriptions of English teachers as having a solemn duty and being charged with assuring that the voice of poetry remains vital within the conversation of humankind. Reading literature and a wide variety of narratives is not, it is argued, a luxury, but a necessity. Storytelling is what makes us human and has an evolutionary significance. Stories are essential to teach lessons, to remember events, to entertain, to celebrate, and even warn of danger. And for students, English is essential in developing a highly sophisticated ability, but a very basic necessity for human communication, empathy. And what happens if this highly sophisticated basic necessity isn't achieved? well, we then risk seeing students remaining parochial, never to become citizens of the world. All of which I think you will agree amounts to a considerable amount of pressure placed on the English secondary school teacher, who find themselves responsible for the effective and attitudinal education of secondary students. As stated previously, my research will be concerned with the professional identity of the English secondary school teacher. But what am I referring to when I speak of identity? According to Christopher Day, identity refers to the way we make sense of ourselves to ourselves and the image of ourselves that we present to others. In addition to this, Day also argues that there is an unavoidable interrelationship between the professional and the personal, where the ways in which teachers form their professional identities are influenced both by how they feel about themselves and how they feel about their students. So we can see ideas of perception play very heavily into the forming of professional identity. But what is the role of the subject, in this case English, in the forming of that professional identity? Bayard suggests that many teachers derive their professional identity, first of all, from the subject they teach, showing us that far from being merely part of their identity, a teacher's subject can have a dramatic impact on the forming of their professional identity. If, according to Ginnett's teaching proverb, teachers possess a tremendous power to make a child's life miserable or joyous, then an added importance must be placed on the professional identity. In fact, it could be considered an unavoidable stepping stone for the progression of society. So what threats are there to this identity? Day highlights that the existing professional identity of a teacher is in a continual process of evolution. Day suggests that it is a continuing site of struggle where instabilities create stresses in the emotional fabric of the teacher's identity. And as Cooper and Olson have also suggested, teacher identity is continually being informed, formed, and reformed as individuals over time and through interaction with others. So what would be the effect then if a crucial strand of knowledge, namely a confidence in engaging with linguistic issues that may be applied in textual analysis, is missing from that valuable schema which forms such a large part of that professional identity? Could we then see a struggle for identity and a difficulty in forming a secure professional identity? And if so, what would be the effect on the well-being of the teacher? One only needs to look at the news to see the concern and worry regarding teacher well-being in the current education system. Teaching has become a profession where more than 2/3 of educational professionals describe themselves as stressed, and where 1 in 3 teachers plan to quit, citing increased workload and diminishing respect as reasons to leave the job, making it impossible to avoid the issues of confidence and security plaguing teachers at all levels of experience. A frequent issue in in studying teacher well-being is that many teachers identify themselves as being susceptible to the imposter phenomenon, or as it is more commonly known, imposter syndrome. For those not familiar with the imposter phenomenon, it was first described by Dr. Pauline Clance from her observations in a clinical setting in 1985. According to Sokolow and Alexander, individuals with the imposter phenomenon experience intense feelings that their achievements are undeserved and worry that they are likely to be exposed as a fraud. Clancy's initial views were confined to professional women, but since then it has been expanded to include a wider range of potential sufferers. Sokolow and Alexander mention that most imposters are able to fulfill their academic or work requirements despite their self-perceived fraudulence. It is possible that subclinical symptoms resulting from imposter fears can, if prolonged, lead to clinical levels of depression or anxiety. Studies of imposters have also demonstrated that overworking is one observed and self-perceived pattern of the imposter cycle. Just in addition to this, one of the key findings of the government's 2019 Teacher Wellbeing Research and Respect report cited that overwork was one of the most common issues affecting teacher wellbeing, where the average teacher claimed they work on average 51 hours per week. The report does not explore how much of this could be due to the imposter phenomenon. Coupled with issues of the imposter phenomenon, I would argue that social comparison theory can also pose a threat to the forming of that teacher's professional identity. Festinger argued that we have the drive to assess our opinions and abilities. When we can't evaluate our opinions and abilities, we tend to compare ourselves with others. In this case, the relationship with colleagues and peers within their subject group can provide a potential for feelings of inadequacy amongst teachers, it could be argued. This situation could only be exacerbated by the growth of the edu-Twitter revolution and the rise in online teacher discussions via social networking platforms, where factors such as the number of followers and likes a teacher receives for their tweets can serve as validation of perceived feeling of inadequacy for some teachers, or could chip away at the security of that teacher's professional identity. We see this in the quote on the slide, which states, "Social media can significantly contribute to an unrealistic ideal and ought self. People are measuring themselves against a constant state of beauty and glory." We've seen studies concerning the harmful effect social media can have on students and young people, but in my research, I haven't yet found a study observing the negative impact that this could have on the identity of the English teacher, which is something I hope to explore in my research. I hope by this point, I've established the veritable battlefield at play in the identity construction of the English teacher, with an increasing demand in recent years for teachers to justify themselves to students, colleagues, senior leadership and beyond, coupled with the pressure exerted by the responsibility of their position. With all this in mind, it could be argued that the English teacher is in a position where to admit an insecurity in linguistic knowledge and understanding could be seen as tantamount to sacrificing their own identity as an English teacher, which when you consider a teacher's motivations for joining the profession, whether they be informed by altruism or a desire to teach a subject important to them, can arguably have disastrous consequences on their well-being. I hope by now I've made clear the potential problem faced by English teachers. So another question which needs to be asked is, how can this issue be resolved, and what role could pedagogical stylistics play in helping English teachers to restore their professional identity? This is what I intend to discover through my PhD research and will form the final section of my presentation today. I intend, through using a combination of qualitative and quantitative research methods, such as you can see on screen, to discover whether, by adapting teaching styles and practice to incorporate pedagogical stylistic methods, again, I've included a stylistic toolkit of the current methods I am considering, whether English teachers can strengthen their schema of linguistic knowledge and could then in turn benefit in their professional identity, subsequently having a positive impact on their well-being. I've decided that I'll focus my research on the application of pedagogical stylistics at Key Stage 3. So for anyone who doesn't know, those would be years 7 to 9, the introductory 3 years of secondary school. I've decided on this for many reasons. Namely, Key Stage 3 classes will be removed from the added external pressures and demands of examinations. I also believe a move to an integrated English language and literature curriculum, achieved through the use of pedagogical stylistics, will add a greater integrity and importance to a time in education which has been disparagingly referred to as the wasted years. This will also, I believe, smooth the transition from the recently reformed Key Stage 2 curriculum, whose changes have not necessarily informed or shaped the years of Key Stage 3 in any official form from policymakers. I've also decided to focus my research on the teaching of poetry. I've done this for many reasons. First of all, the teaching of poetry is held up by many as being the measuring stick of a good English teacher, on account of the demands it can make on an English teacher's arsenal of teaching strategies. Poetry can also face many interpretive obstacles, forming a resistance barrier with teachers and students alike, as observed on the slide. Poetry is written with restrictions around form and structure, resulting in a condensed language, which tends to make the language more complex and denser than other literary forms. Owing to this unique nature of poetry, therefore, some readers can find the poetic text impenetrable. I hope that stylistic analysis can provide the key to many students and teachers alike to empower them with rigorous analytical techniques while still maintaining the poem's magic and steering them away from the need for what Michael and Peter Benton refer to as line-by-line analysis, which in most cases leads to the imposition of the teacher's views and the neglect of student responses. In order to empower student responses, English teachers need to listen and to move away from this form of analysis and towards what Mason and Giovanelli refer to as an authentic reading born out of an unmediated interpretation. I'm fully aware that in this presentation, I may be preaching to the converted, but to paraphrase Paul Simpson, why should English teachers do stylistics? Because to do stylistics is to explore language, and more specifically, to explore creativity in language use. Doing stylistics, therefore, enriches ways of thinking about language, and exploring language offers a substantial purchase on understanding of literary texts. If, as I stated earlier, English teachers are suffering from mounting pressure in their jobs, how do I believe informing their practice with stylistics will benefit them and not simply add more pressure onto an already strained situation? I return to Alsop's duties of an English teacher and the belief that English educators must also try to change and improve. Being routinely stuck in Clancy's imposter cycle and the demands of their jobs is having a negative effect on English teachers. A fundamental breaking of that cycle through the use of stylistic methods I propose today, I would argue, needs to happen. By teaching text stylistically, teachers will be putting language at the centre of teaching practice and consistently giving students that opportunity to create, explore, and engage. I know I'm only at the start of this research journey, and there will be many twists and turns lying ahead waiting for me, but I grow more convinced every day that the work I carry out will play a positive role in the formation of the identity of English teachers. Being an English teacher, it would be remiss of me not to leave you without a bit of homework at the end of this presentation. There's a Stephen Spender poem which has stayed with me from the beginning of my career till now, and it even informed the title of my PhD proposal last summer, called An Elementary School Classroom in a Slum. And to close my presentation today, I would like to share the final stanza and ask you to pay particular attention to the final line and to reflect on it when reflecting on what we learned over the past days. Break, oh, break open till they break the town, and show the children to green fields, and make their world run azure on golden sands, and let their tongues run naked into books, the white and green leaves open, history theirs, whose language is the sun. Thank you very much for listening. I'm happy to answer any more questions you may have. These are my references, and just if anyone wants to help